I cared for a wounded stranger on a forgotten road. He carried a cross, but he wasn't from here. What he told me about Jesus shattered everything I thought I knew. Not religion, not doctrine, something older, something hidden between worlds. His story didn't break my faith, it rebuilt it from the ground up. But you'll need to hear it all to understand why I'll never be the same. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that reveal hidden truths. Let's begin. It was a cold night in rural Tennessee, the kind of cold that seeps through your coat and settles in your bones. Laura Bennett was driving alone, her headlights cutting weak paths through the darkness. She'd just finished a double shift at the mission hospital. 16 hours of watching people suffer. 16 hours of doing everything she could, and still not being enough. She was tired, so tired. Not just physically, it was deeper than that. A tiredness that lived in her chest, in her soul. The rain had started an hour ago, fine and persistent, the kind that doesn't look like much but soaks you through. The fog came with it, rolling across the fields like something alive. It hid the dirt road ahead, swallowed the trees on either side. Laura gripped the steering wheel tighter. She just wanted to get home, take a hot shower, fall into bed, maybe sleep without dreaming for once, without seeing the faces of patients she couldn't save, without hearing her mother's voice asking why God had abandoned them. She didn't believe in miracles anymore. Not really. She went through the motions, said the prayers at bedsides because that's what people needed to hear. But the words felt empty, like speaking a language you'd forgotten the meaning of. Her mother had prayed every single day, right up until the cancer took her 2 years ago. God hadn't answered those prayers. Laura had stopped expecting him to answer hers. The windshield wipers scraped back and forth, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. And then she saw the light. It came from across the field to her right, a brilliant white light that cut through the fog like a blade. Not yellow like headlights, not flickering like a flashlight. Pure white, steady, strong, but it pulsed, like a heartbeat, like something breathing. Laura's foot moved to the brake instinctively, but before she could press down, the car made the decision for her. The engine coughed once, twice, then died completely. She coasted to a stop in the middle of the empty road. Silence fell over everything, heavy and complete. No engine rumble, no rain sound. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. It was the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. Laura sat frozen in the driver's seat, hands still on the wheel. What just happened? She turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. Her breath came faster now. Not panic, not yet, but something close to it. That feeling you get when you know something's wrong but can't name what it is yet. She looked toward the field where the light had been. It was gone now. Only darkness and fog remained. But then she saw movement. On the shoulder of the road, near the tree line. A shadow. Shifting. Moving strangely. Laura's nurse instinct kicked in before her common sense could argue. Someone might be hurt. Someone might need help. That's what you do. That's who you are. She grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment. Her hands were steady as she opened the door. The cold hit her immediately. Rain misted her face. She walked toward the shoulder, flashlight beam cutting through the fog. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded small, swallowed by the night. No answer. But the shadow was there. She could see it now. Something on the ground, between the trees, partially hidden by mud and darkness. Laura approached slowly, carefully. The beam of her flashlight swept across the ground, and then she saw him. No, not him exactly. It. A being. That's the only word that fit. Lying in the mud, motionless, covered in dirt and what looked like blood. But the blood was wrong somehow. Too light, almost luminescent in the flashlight beam. Laura's breath caught in her throat. The being was humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head. But the proportions were slightly off. The limbs too long, the chest too narrow. The skin pale beyond pale, almost translucent. And there, on the chest, visible even through the mud and blood, was a cross. Not a crucifix, not a religious symbol painted or tattooed. An actual cross, gold, simple, hanging from a thin chain around the being's neck. And it was glowing, faintly, pulsing with the same rhythm as the light she'd seen across the field. Laura stood frozen, her mind trying to process what her eyes were seeing. trying to find a rational explanation and failing. This wasn't human, couldn't be human, but it was hurt. That much was clear. And when someone is hurt, you help. That's what you do. That's the only thing that makes sense in a world that stopped making sense a long time ago. Laura knelt in the mud beside the fallen being. She had no idea what she was about to discover. No idea that this moment, this choice to help, would shatter everything she thought she knew about faith, about God, about the universe itself. She only knew that something needed her, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough. Laura knelt in the cold mud, and her nurse training took over. Forget what this looks like. Forget that it shouldn't exist. There's a pulse. There's injury. That's all that matters right now. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched the being's shoulder. The skin was cold, colder than the night air, and it felt different, not quite like skin at all. Smooth, almost like glass that somehow had warmth buried deep underneath. The being didn't move. Laura pressed 2 fingers against where the neck should be, searching for a pulse. There was something there. Not a pulse exactly, more like a vibration, a subtle rhythm that hummed against her fingertips. Different, but alive. She leaned closer, trying to see if the chest was rising and falling. It was hard to tell. The breathing, if it was breathing, was so shallow she might have been imagining it. And then she heard it, not with her ears, with something else, something inside, a voice, soft, gentle, speaking directly into her mind. "Please, don't be afraid." Laura jerked back instinctively. Her heart hammered in her chest. She looked around wildly. Was someone else here? Had someone spoken? But there was no one. Just her and the being in the mud. Rain falling softly. Fog pressing in from all sides. "I need help." The voice came again. Clearer this time. Unmistakably inside her head. Laura's hands were shaking now. She stared down at the being. Its eyes were still closed, lips unmoving. "Who?" she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" "My name is Lior." The words formed in her mind like thoughts that weren't her own, like someone whispering in a language you suddenly understand, even though you've never heard it before. Laura's breath came in short gasps. This wasn't possible. Telepathy wasn't real. This wasn't happening, but it was happening. "I'm not from here," the voice continued, patient and kind despite whatever pain the being must be in. "I come from far away. I was hurt. I crashed. Please, I don't want to frighten you." Laura looked around again. The empty road, the wall of fog, her dead car sitting silent in the middle of it all. She was alone, with something that shouldn't exist, having a conversation inside her own mind. She should run, get in the car and try to start it and drive away as fast as possible. This was insane. This was impossible. But the cross on the being's chest pulsed with soft golden light, warm, inviting. And Laura, who had stopped believing in signs and miracles and divine intervention, felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. "Lior," she said aloud, testing the name. It felt strange on her tongue, foreign, but somehow right. "Yes, you're not human. No, I'm sorry if that frightens you." Laura took a deep breath, let it out slowly, looked down at the wounded being before her. Not human, from somewhere else, somewhere impossibly far away, and wearing a cross. "Why do you have that?" she asked, pointing to the glowware impossibly far away, and wearing a cross. "Why do you have that?" she asked, pointing to the glowing pendant. "It's a reminder," Lior answered softly, "of a truth I learned long ago, a truth your world once knew." Laura felt tears prick at her eyes. She didn't understand why, didn't understand any of this, but her hands moved on their own, checking wounds, assessing damage. The nurse in her stronger than the fear. There were injuries, burns across the side of the being's torso, something that looked like a deep gash on one arm. The blood was strange, too thin, too bright, but it was blood. "I'm going to help you," Laura said, her voice steadier now. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe. Thank you," came the grateful whisper in her mind. "Thank you for not running, for choosing kindness over fear." Laura almost laughed. Almost. Because 2 years ago, before her mother died, before faith crumbled into dust, she would have called this divine providence, would have seen it as a test from God. Now she just saw it as a choice. Help or don't help. Be who you used to be or become someone harder, colder. She chose help. With effort, she got her arms under Lior's shoulders. The being was lighter than expected, almost weightless, as if the bones were hollow, as if made for a world with less gravity. She half-dragged, half-carried Lior toward her car, got the back door open, maneuvered the being onto the seat as gently as possible. The cross glowed brighter for just a moment, warm light filling the car interior, and Laura, without thinking, bowed her head and prayed. Not the empty words she'd been saying for 2 years, not the ritual phrases that meant nothing. Real prayer, desperate prayer, the kind that comes from the deepest part of you. Please, whatever this is, whoever sent this, help me know what to do. She didn't know if anyone was listening, didn't know if anyone ever listened, but she said it anyway. Then she got in the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine roared to life as if it had never died at all. Laura didn't question it, didn't think too hard about it. She just put the car in gear and drove, up the hill, toward the old abandoned chapel that sat forgotten at the top, the one nobody went to anymore, the one she hadn't set foot in since her mother's funeral. That's where she would take him. That's where they would be safe. And maybe, just maybe, that's where she would finally get some answers. The old chapel sat crooked on the hillside like a memory nobody wanted to keep. Laura had driven past it 1,000 times and never once thought about stopping. Not since the funeral. Not since she'd sat in those wooden pews and listened to the pastor talk about God's plan and divine timing, and how her mother was in a better place now. Words that meant nothing. Words that helped no one. But tonight, it was the only place that made sense. She pulled up to the front, gravel crunching under the tires. Killed the engine. The silence rushed back in, but different this time. Not threatening. Just waiting. Laura got out and opened the back door. Lior was conscious now. Eyes open. They were large, deeper than human eyes, the color hard to name, somewhere between gray and gold. Where are we? The voice asked in her mind. Somewhere safe, Laura answered. Can you walk? I think so. With her help, Lior managed to stand, took slow, careful steps toward the chapel door. Laura pushed it open. The hinges screamed in protest. Nobody had oiled them in years. Nobody cared enough to. The inside smelled like damp wood and loneliness. Dust hung thick in the air. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, creating strange patterns on the floor. It was cold. Colder inside than out somehow. But it would do. Laura guided Lior to the front pew, laid out her coat as a makeshift bed. Then she went back to the car for supplies. First aid kit, bottled water, a blanket she kept in the trunk. Not much, but it would have to be enough. There were old candles on the altar, half melted, forgotten. Laura found matches in a drawer and lit them one by one. Soft light bloomed in the darkness, warm, gentle. The chapel didn't seem so lonely anymore. She returned to Lior and knelt beside him, opened the first aid kit, started cleaning the wounds as best she could. The being's blood was strange, almost luminescent in the candlelight, but it clotted like human blood, responded to pressure like human blood. Different, but not completely alien. Laura worked in silence, her hands steady, practiced. This she knew how to do. This made sense. But her mind raced. Questions piled up. Impossible questions. What was this being? Where had he come from? Why was he here? And why, in God's name, was he wearing a cross? As if reading her thoughts, and maybe he could, Lior spoke again. The cross, he said softly. You're wondering about it. Laura paused, bandage in hand. Yeah, she admitted. I am. Lior reached up with one long, pale hand, touched the pendant on his chest. The gold glowed warmer under his fingers. It's a reminder, he said. This time the words came from his mouth, his actual voice. It was beautiful, musical, layered with harmonics that shouldn't be possible. A reminder of what? Laura asked. Her heart was beating faster. That heaven and earth were never separate. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning Laura couldn't quite grasp. She sat back on her heels, looked at him, really looked at him. I don't understand, she whispered. Lior's strange eyes met hers. Kind, impossibly kind. You will, he said gently. Jesus came to teach this, but your people, you forgot. Laura felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been sealed shut for 2 years, since her mother's last breath, since the moment she realized God wasn't listening, had never been listening. Heat bloomed behind her eyes. She tried to blink it away. "Jesus?" she said, her voice breaking. "What does Jesus have to do with you? With any of this?" "Everything," Lior answered simply. "He came from the same place I come from, to teach the same truth. That love is the force that binds all things, that every living being carries divinity inside them. That separation is an illusion." Laura's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her knees to steady them. That's not what they teach," she said. "I know." Lior's voice was sad. "They made it complicated. Made it about buildings and rules, and who's saved and who isn't. But it was always simpler than that. It was always just about love, about remembering what you truly are." A tear rolled down Laura's cheek, then another. She didn't try to stop them. She thought about her mother, about the prayers that went unanswered, about the bitterness that had grown in her heart like weeds choking out everything good. "My mother prayed every day," Laura said, her voice barely audible. She believed with everything she had, and she died anyway, suffering, in pain. Where was God then? Lior was quiet for a moment. The candles flickered. Shadows danced on the chapel walls. Then he reached out and gently took Laura's hand in his. His skin was cold, but something warm pulsed underneath. "She's not gone," he said softly. "Not really. She lives in every act of kindness you perform, in every patient you comfort, in every hand you hold. That's how love works. It doesn't die. It transforms. It moves through you." And that's when Laura broke. She doubled over, sobs tearing through her body. All the grief she'd been holding, all the anger, all the loneliness, it poured out of her in waves. And Lior held her hand and said nothing. Just let her cry. Let her feel. Let her release. The words echoed in the empty chapel like a living prayer, like truth spoken into darkness. And Laura, for the first time since her mother died, felt something she thought was gone forever. She felt God. Not in some distant heaven, not in some far-off throne room. Right here, in this broken chapel, in the presence of this impossible being, in the warmth spreading through her chest, in the peace settling over her shoulders like a blanket. She didn't have to understand it, didn't have to explain it. She just had to feel it. And for now, that was enough. The candles burned lower. The night grew deeper. Laura sat on the floor beside the pew where Lior rested, her back against the old wood, her breathing finally steady again after the tears. She felt emptied out, hollowed, but in a good way, like a cup that had been dirty for years finally rinsed clean. Lior was quiet, resting, healing, whatever beings like him did. But Laura could feel him in her mind, a gentle presence, like having someone sit beside you in comfortable silence. She stared at the cross around his neck, still glowing faintly, pulsing with that heartbeat rhythm. "You said you come from the same place Jesus came from," Laura said finally. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Where is that exactly?" She expected him to say heaven, or some spiritual dimension, something religious and abstract. But Lior's answer was simpler, and somehow more impossible. "A world much like yours, but older, further along in its understanding." Laura turned to look at him. "You mean another planet?" "Yes." She let that sink in. Another planet, with beings that looked almost human, that could speak telepathically, that knew about Jesus. None of it made sense. All of it made sense. "Why did Jesus come here?" she asked. Lior opened his eyes, those strange, beautiful eyes. "Because your world was suffering, lost in darkness, trapped in fear and violence and separation. He came as part of a brotherhood, beings who travel between worlds teaching one simple truth." What truth? That love is the only law that matters. That every being, human, alien, animal, carries the same divine spark. That you are not separate from God. You are part of God. And when you remember that, everything changes. Laura pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. "The church doesn't teach it that way," she said quietly. "I know." Lior's voice was gentle. No judgment, just sadness. "Humans do this. You take something simple and make it complicated. Take something free and put walls around it. Take something infinite and make it small." So Jesus wasn't the only Son of God? Wasn't special? He was very special, but not because he was different from you, because he remembered what you forgot. He woke up to his true nature, and he came to show you that you could do the same. That's what the miracles were. Not proof that he was better. Proof that you have the same power inside you. Laura's mind reeled. This went against everything she'd been taught, everything she'd believed. But somehow, deep in her gut, it felt true. More true than anything she'd heard in a church. The cross, she said, pointing to the glowing pendant. What does it really mean? Lior touched it again, his long fingers reverent. It's not a symbol of suffering. Not originally. It's a symbol of union. The vertical line is heaven. The horizontal is earth. Where they meet is the heart. That's where the divine and the human become one. That's where miracles happen. So Jesus didn't die for our sins. He died because humans fear what they don't understand, because power structures saw him as a threat. But his death wasn't the point. His life was. The way he loved, the way he healed, the way he saw divinity in everyone, even the outcasts. That was the message. Love without condition, forgiveness without limit, power shared, not hoarded. Even as Lior spoke, Laura felt something shifting inside her. The old foundations crumbling, new ones taking shape. It wasn't that her faith was being destroyed. It was being rebuilt, remade into something bigger, truer. My mother, Laura said, her voice shaking. She believed Jesus would save her, believed if she prayed hard enough, had enough faith, she'd be healed. But she wasn't, and I hated God for that, hated him for not answering. Lior sat up slowly, moved to sit beside her on the floor. His presence radiated peace. Even wounded, even far from home, he carried something Laura had been searching for her whole life. Your mother was healed, he said softly. She died, Laura shot back, anger flaring for just a moment. The body died, but she was healed before that. In her heart, in her spirit, she knew she was loved, knew she was part of something infinite. Death is not the end, Laura. It's a doorway, a transformation. Your mother walked through it with grace. Tears welled up again. Laura didn't fight them this time. But I wanted more time with her. I know, and that pain is real. It's valid. But she's not gone. She lives in you, in every patient you touch with compassion, in every life you save with skill and love. She's there, every time. That's how the divine works. Through hands and hearts, through acts of mercy. Laura leaned her head back against the pew, stared up at the broken ceiling, at the stars visible through the gaps. So what do I do now? She whispered. How do I live with this? The same way you lived before, but awake now, aware. Every act of kindness is prayer. Every moment of compassion is worship. You don't need a building or a ritual or permission from someone in robes. You are the temple. Your heart is the altar. And love is the only offering that matters. Something broke open in Laura then. Not with pain, with release. All these years she'd been looking outside herself for God. In churches, in prayers, in miracles that never came. But God had been inside her all along, in every patient she'd comforted, in every hand she'd held, in every grief she'd shared. She'd been doing the sacred work without knowing it. She'd been living the truth Jesus taught, even when she thought she'd lost her faith. He lives in you, Lior said, reading her thoughts again. Jesus lives in you, in every act of love, every choice to help instead of turn away. That's what resurrection means. Not a body rising, a truth awakening, over and over. In every willing heart, Laura looked at this impossible being beside her, this stranger from the stars wearing a cross that glowed with light. And for the first time since her mother died, she felt whole. She didn't have all the answers, didn't understand everything, probably never would, but she understood this. Love was real, connection was real, God was real, not in some distant heaven, right here, right now, in this broken chapel, in this sacred moment, in the space between two beings, human and other, choosing compassion over fear. That was the miracle, that was the truth, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The chapel was quiet except for the soft crackling of candles. Laura had just finished wrapping the last bandage around Lior's arm when she heard it. A sound from outside, from her car, the radio, turning on by itself. At first it was just static, white noise hissing through the night, but then it changed. Became something else. Voices layered over voices, words in languages she didn't know, frequencies that shouldn't exist. Laura's hands froze. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. "What is that?" she whispered. Liar didn't seem concerned. He simply looked toward the door, toward the sound. "They're looking for me," he said in her mind. "My people. They know I crashed. They're trying to find me." Laura stood up quickly, too quickly. Her head spun. The world tilted sideways for just a second. Are they coming here?" "Not yet. They're searching, scanning, but they won't harm you." Laura wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold, suddenly aware of how impossible all of this was. An alien being in an abandoned chapel, telepathic voices, a car radio receiving signals from space, and her, standing in the middle of it, acting like this was somehow normal. "I'm losing my mind," she said aloud. Her voice shook. "This can't be real. None of this can be real." The static from the car grew louder, more insistent, like something trying to break through. Laura backed up until she hit the wall, pressed her shoulders against the cold stone. Her breathing came fast and shallow. "I'm having a breakdown. That's what this is. Too much stress. Too many shifts. I'm hallucinating. Laura," Lior's voice in her mind, gentle but firm. "Breathe. You're safe. I promise you're safe." But she couldn't breathe, couldn't slow down. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred at the edges. 2 years of holding everything together. 2 years of pushing through grief and exhaustion and loss. It was all crashing down at once. Lior stood, moved toward her. His movements were fluid now, graceful, the wounds already beginning to heal impossibly fast. He didn't touch her, just stood close, his presence calm, steady. "Don't be afraid of the truth," he said aloud, his voice like music, like peace made audible. "How can I not be afraid?" Laura's voice broke. "Everything I thought I knew is wrong. Everything is—" "The fear," Lior interrupted softly. "The fear is the root of all sickness of the soul, not the truth. The truth will set you free, but fear will keep you in chains." Laura stared at him, at this being who shouldn't exist, who was telling her things that shattered her understanding of reality. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "Believe. Not in the old way. Not in the way I was taught, but in whatever this is." Lior's strange eyes were kind, patient. "You don't have to know how. You just have to choose. Fear or love. Closing or opening. That's the only choice that ever matters." Laura took a shaky breath, then another, let the air fill her lungs, felt her heart slow just a fraction. The radio static faded, quieted, then went silent. She looked at Lior, really looked at him, at the cross glowing on his chest. "Why do you wear that?" she asked. "Really? Why a cross?" Lior touched the pendant, the gold warm under his fingers. "Because Jesus healed me too," he said simply. "In another time, on another world." Laura felt her breath catch. He visited your planet. He traveled many places, teaching, healing, showing beings across the universe what they'd forgotten. That love is the force that binds all creation, that every soul carries the same light. And he healed you. I was lost, broken, consumed by fear and anger. I had forgotten what I was, forgotten my purpose. He reminded me, with kindness, with compassion, with love that asked nothing in return. Silence filled the chapel, but it wasn't empty silence. It was full, present, like a third person in the room. Laura felt tears on her cheeks, didn't remember when they'd started falling. "I want to believe that," she said, her voice barely audible. "I want to believe that love is enough, that it can heal, that it matters. But I've seen so much suffering, so much pain. How do I reconcile that?" "You don't," Lior said gently. "You don't reconcile it. You don't make it make sense. You just choose, in the face of all that darkness, to be light anyway. That's faith, not believing despite the evidence, but loving despite the pain." He moved closer, held out his hand, palm up, offering. "Faith is when love acts without calculation," he said. "When you help someone not because you'll be rewarded, not because it's safe, not because it makes sense, but because your heart says yes. That's when you're most aligned with the divine, when love moves through you without hesitation." Laura looked at his outstretched hand, at the pale, strange skin, at the fingers too long to be human. She thought about the moment she found him in the mud, how her instinct was to help, how she didn't think about the danger or the impossibility. She just acted. That was faith. That was prayer. even when she thought she'd lost both. Slowly, Laura reached out, took his hand in hers. His skin was cold, but something warm pulsed underneath, like a current, like life in a different frequency. "Then I can still believe," she said. Not a question, a statement. "You never stopped believing," Lior replied. "You just stopped trusting what you felt. But your heart knew, it always knew. That's why you stopped when you saw the light. That's why you helped. That's why you're here now." Laura squeezed his hand, felt the warmth spread up her arm, into her chest, filling spaces that had been empty for so long. "I'm still afraid," she admitted. "Good. Fear means you're alive. Fear means you're paying attention. The question isn't whether you feel fear, it's what you do with it. Do you let it stop you, or do you move forward anyway?" Laura thought about her mother, about the fear she must have felt facing death, about the grace she showed anyway, the love she gave even when her body was failing. That was faith, that was courage, not the absence of fear, but love that acts despite it. "Teach me," Laura said. "Teach me how to live like that." Lior smiled. It transformed his face, made him look almost human, almost familiar. "You already know how. You just forgot. But we'll remember together. One moment at a time. One act of love at a time." The candles flickered. Outside, the night was still dark, still cold, still full of mysteries Laura couldn't begin to understand. But inside, in this broken chapel, something new was being born. Not a religion, not a doctrine, not a set of rules, just truth, simple and pure and undeniable. Love is the answer. Love is the way. Love is everything. And Laura, holding the hand of a being from the stars, finally understood what Jesus had been trying to teach all along. Not to worship him, but to become like him, to remember what she truly was, to let love move through her without fear or hesitation. That was the miracle. That was the resurrection. That was the kingdom of heaven. Not someplace you go when you die, but something you become when you wake up. And Laura was finally waking up. Morning light filtered through the broken chapel roof. Laura woke with a start. She'd fallen asleep on the floor. Her back ached. Her neck was stiff. She blinked against the brightness, tried to remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The light in the field, the being in the mud, the conversation that shattered everything. She sat up quickly, looked around. Lior was standing near the altar, his back to her, completely still and completely healed. Laura scrambled to her feet, walked toward him on unsteady legs. "Lior." He turned, smiled that almost human smile. The wounds were gone, all of them. The burns, the gash on his arm, even the smaller cuts and bruises. His pale skin was smooth, unblemished. "How?" Laura started, couldn't finish. She looked down at the pew where he'd been lying, at her coat spread out like a blanket. There were marks on the fabric, stains that glowed faintly in the morning light, like gold dust, like concentrated sunlight had been ground into powder and sprinkled there. Laura touched the marks. They were warm. They pulsed slightly under her fingertips. "What is this?" she whispered. "Residue," Lior said simply. "From the healing. Light made physical. It will fade by nightfall." Laura's mind raced. Tried to find a medical explanation, a scientific reason. Came up empty. She looked at him, at his completely healed body, at the cross still glowing gently on his chest. "I don't understand," she said. Lior moved closer, his presence still calm, still peaceful. "Compassion heals before medicine does," he said. "You cared for me, not because you understood what I was, but because you saw suffering and chose to ease it. That choice, that love, it created the conditions for healing." The body just followed. "But I'm just a nurse. I can't." "You're not just anything," Lior interrupted gently. "You're a being of light temporarily wearing flesh. And when you act from love, you access power beyond what you think is possible." Laura reached out, touched the cross hanging from his neck. It was warm, hot even, like metal left in the sun. "Jesus taught this?" she asked. "He lived it, showed it, proved it. Every miracle he performed wasn't about him being special. It was about showing you what you're capable of, what every human is capable of when they remember who they truly are." Laura thought about her patients at the hospital, the terminal cases, the ones she'd prayed over with empty words, the ones she'd given up on because medicine had nothing left to offer. What if she'd been approaching it all wrong? What if healing wasn't about the right drugs or the right procedures? What if it was about love, about connection, about treating each person not as a body to fix, but as a soul to honor? When you care for someone, Lior continued, you pray with your hands. Every touch, every kindness, every moment of compassion. That's prayer. That's worship. That's the sacred work you were born to do. The words settled into Laura like seeds finding soil. She'd been doing the sacred work all along, without knowing it, without recognizing it. Every shift at the hospital, every patient she comforted, every hand she held. That was prayer. That was her connection to the divine. She didn't need a building, didn't need a priest, didn't need permission. She just needed to show up, with love, with presence, with open hands and an open heart. I want to, Laura started, paused, gathered courage. There's someone, a patient. She's dying. The doctors have given up. I've been sitting with her, trying to make her comfortable, but I feel so helpless. Lior tilted his head, studying her. You want me to see her? It wasn't a question. He knew. Of course he knew. Laura nodded. Her name is Annie. She's 56. Lung cancer, stage 4. She has maybe weeks left, maybe days. She's in so much pain and I can't fix it. I can't save her. But maybe. She trailed off, uncertain. Was she really about to ask an alien being to visit a dying woman in a hospital? Was she really hoping for a miracle? Yes, she was. Because somewhere in the last 12 hours, she'd started believing again. Not in the old way, not in the God of her childhood, but in something bigger, something realer, in love as a force, in compassion as healing, in the possibility that there was more to reality than what she could see and touch and measure. I'll come, Lior said simply. Relief flooded through Laura, followed immediately by fear. How do we? You can't exactly walk into a hospital looking like… She gestured at him, at his too pale skin, his too long limbs, his otherworldly face. Lior smiled, closed his eyes, and changed. It happened so smoothly Laura almost missed it. His features shifted, softened, became more human. His skin took on color, his proportions normalized. When he opened his eyes again, they were brown, plain, ordinary. He looked like a man now, tall, thin, but human. Laura stared. How did you… Perception, he said. I'm showing you what you expect to see, what will allow you to stay calm, what will allow others to accept my presence. The form doesn't matter, only the love inside it. Laura nodded, still stunned, still trying to process. Okay, she said. Okay, we'll go. But we need to be careful. People will ask questions. They'll want to know who you are. Tell them I'm a friend, a healer from out of town. They'll believe what they need to believe. Laura looked at the cross one more time, still glowing, still pulsing with that heartbeat rhythm. Thank you, she whispered, for trusting me, for teaching me. You're teaching yourself, Lior replied. I'm just reminding you what you already know. They left the chapel together, morning sun bright on their faces, the world looking the same as it always had. But Laura saw it differently now, saw the light in everything, the connections, the web of love holding it all together. She got in the car. Lior sat beside her. She turned the key. The engine started smoothly, and as they drove down the hill toward town, toward the hospital, toward Annie and whatever waited there, Laura whispered a prayer, not to a distant God, not to some authority figure in the sky, but to the love moving through her, the light she carried, the divine presence she was finally learning to trust. Let me be your hands. Let me be your voice. Let me be love in action. And somewhere deep inside, in a place beyond words, beyond thought, she heard the answer. You already are. You always have been. I've been waiting for you to remember. The mission hospital smelled exactly how Laura remembered. Antiseptic, sickness, underneath it all. The smell of people trying not to die, trying to hold on just one more day. She'd worked here for 6 years, knew every hallway, every room, every creaking floorboard. This place was more familiar to her than her own apartment, but walking in with Lior beside her, it felt different, new, like seeing it for the first time. They moved through the lobby, past the reception desk, the nurse on duty. Carol looked up, smiled. Laura, didn't expect you today. You're not on shift. I know. Just visiting a patient. This is... She glanced at Lior. A friend. He's a healer. I wanted him to meet Annie. Carol's expression softened. Oh, honey. Annie's not doing well. She took a turn last night. Dr. Martinez doesn't think she'll make it through the day. Laura's chest tightened. Can we see her? Of course. Room 237. You know the way. They walked down the hallway, past other rooms, other patients. Laura felt Lior's presence beside her. Calm, grounding, like an anchor in a storm. Room 237 was at the end of the hall. The door was half open. Laura could hear the ventilator, the steady mechanical breathing that was doing the work Annie's lungs couldn't anymore. She paused at the door, looked at Lior. Are you sure about this? He nodded. Love is always sure. They entered. Annie lay in the bed, small, fragile, skin paper thin and gray. She'd lost so much weight. Looked like she might disappear entirely if you stopped watching for just a moment. Her eyes were closed, chest rising and falling with the machine's rhythm, not her own. Laura moved to the bedside, took Annie's hand. It was cold, bony. Annie, her voice soft. It's Laura. I brought someone to see you. No response, just the ventilator, the monitors, the quiet sounds of a body shutting down. Lior stepped closer, stood on the other side of the bed. He looked down at Annie with such tenderness, such complete compassion, like she was the most important person in the universe. He reached out, placed his hand gently on her forehead, and the room changed. The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to dim, or maybe they became warmer, softer. The white walls took on a golden hue. The air itself felt different, thicker, more present. Laura watched, couldn't look away. Lior closed his eyes. The cross on his chest began to glow, brighter than before, bright enough that Laura had to squint. Then she heard it, his voice, not in her ears, in her mind. But Annie must have heard it too, because her eyes fluttered, opened just slightly. Feel the love, not the fear. Feel the light, not the pain. The monitors changed. The erratic heartbeat steadied. The oxygen levels rose. The ventilator seemed to breathe easier. Laura's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand what she was seeing, couldn't explain it, but she felt it. The presence, the power, the overwhelming sense that something sacred was happening in this ordinary hospital room. Annie's eyes opened fully, for the first time in weeks, clear, aware. She looked at Lior, then at the ceiling. Her cracked lips moved, tried to form words. Laura leaned closer. What is it, Annie? What do you see? He's here. Annie's voice was barely a whisper, but it was her voice, not the rasp of someone drowning in their own lungs. I see him. He's beautiful. Who? Annie. Jesus. A tear rolled down her cheek. He's here. He says I don't have to be afraid. Says my mother is waiting. Says it's just like walking through a door. Laura sobbed. Couldn't help it. The tears came hard and fast. Lior kept his hand on Annie's forehead, kept that channel of light and love flowing. Annie smiled, actually smiled, the first real smile Laura had seen from her in months. Thank you. Annie looked at Laura. For everything. For sitting with me. For caring. You made it bearable. Annie, Shh. It's okay. I'm okay now. I'm not afraid anymore. The heart monitor settled into a strong, steady rhythm. The oxygen saturation climbed to levels they hadn't seen in days. Lior stepped back, removed his hand. The golden light faded gradually. The room returned to its normal state, but Annie remained calm, peaceful, her breathing easier even with the ventilator still helping. Rest now, Lior said aloud, his voice gentle. You're held in love. You'll never be alone. Annie nodded, closed her eyes, drifted into what looked like the most peaceful sleep Laura had ever seen. Laura stood there, shaking, crying, trying to understand what just happened. She looked at the monitors. Everything stable, better than they'd been in weeks. Dr. Martinez would call it impossible, would say the machines were malfunctioning, but Laura knew better. She'd witnessed it, the impossible made real through love. Lior touched her shoulder. She's not cured, not in the way you mean. Her body is still failing, but her soul is healed. She's ready now. When she goes, it will be peaceful, without fear. That's the real healing. Laura nodded, couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. They left the room together, walked back down the hallway. Laura was vaguely aware of nurses and other staff looking at them, whispering, sensing something had happened, something they couldn't name. Outside, in the parking lot, Laura finally found her voice. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing," Lior said simply. "I just reminded her of what's true, that she's loved, that death is not the end, that she's part of something infinite. The rest was her choice, to believe it, to accept it, to let go of the fear. Will she die today? Maybe, maybe not. Time doesn't matter anymore for her. She's already crossed the real threshold, from fear to love, from separation to unity. The body will follow when it's ready." Laura looked back at the hospital, at the building full of suffering and hope and people trying their best to heal with the limited tools they had. She thought about her own hands, how many patients she'd touched, how many she'd comforted, how she'd thought of it as just her job, just what nurses do. But it was more than that. It always had been. Every touch was sacred. Every word of comfort was prayer. Every moment of presence was love made visible. She'd been doing the work of the divine without realizing it. Just like Lior said, just like Jesus taught, not through grand miracles, but through simple acts of compassion, through showing up, through choosing love over and over even when it hurt, even when it didn't seem like enough. That was the real miracle. Not healing that could be measured, but love that could be felt. And Laura understood, finally, completely. This was what she was born to do. Not just treat diseases, but be a channel for light, for love, for the divine working through human hands. She looked at Lior, this being from another world, who wore a cross and taught truth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me, for reminding me." "You would have remembered anyway," he replied. "You were already on the path. I just helped you see it." They stood in silence for a moment, the sun warm on their faces, the world continuing its ordinary business all around them. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything felt sacred. Everything felt connected. Everything felt like love. Laura and Lior were standing by her car when she saw him, Pastor John, walking quickly across the parking lot, his face concerned, confused. He'd been the one who did her mother's funeral, who'd spoken those hollow words about God's plan and better places. Laura had avoided him since then, avoided the church, avoided anything that reminded her of those empty promises. But here he was, and from the look on his face, he'd heard something. "Laura." He reached them, out of breath. "Carol called me, said something happened with Annie, said you brought someone, a healer." Laura glanced at Lior. He remained calm, unbothered. "Pastor John, this is..." She hesitated, didn't know what to call him. Friend seemed inadequate. Stranger seemed wrong. "I'm Lior." He extended his hand. Perfectly human now, perfectly ordinary. John shook it, his grip cautious. "Carol said Annie woke up, said she was talking, peaceful. They're calling it a miracle." "Not a miracle," Lior said gently. "Just love, just truth, just someone being reminded that they're held." John stared at him. "Who are you exactly? What church are you from?" Laura stepped forward. "John, what happened in there? I can't explain it, but I saw it. Annie was dying, she was afraid, and Lior helped her find peace. That's all that matters." "That's not all that matters." John's voice rose slightly. "People are talking, saying there was light in the room, saying they felt something." "Laura, what's going on?" Laura took a breath, knew she had to be honest, knew she couldn't hide this. "A being showed me the power of love in action," she said simply. "That's what happened." "A being? What does that mean?" Laura met his eyes. "It means everything I thought I knew about God and Jesus and faith was too small. It means the truth is bigger, stranger, more beautiful than any of us were taught." John's face paled. "Laura, you're talking like you've lost your faith." "No." She shook her head. "I found it. For real this time. Not the version we recite on Sundays. The real thing. The version that actually changes people. I need to understand." John looked at Lior. "Did you do something to her? Are you some kind of cult leader?" "I'm a teacher," Lior said calmly. "Like many who have come before. I teach what Jesus taught. Love, compassion, unity, the truth that all beings are connected." "Jesus." John repeated the name carefully. "You speak as if you knew him. I know what he taught. I know why he came. I know the message that was diluted and distorted over centuries of human interpretation." John took a step back. "This is blasphemy." "Is it?" Leor's voice remained gentle. Is it blasphemy to say that love is the only law that matters? That God lives in every act of kindness? That heaven is not a place you go, but a state of being you choose? Jesus said all of this. You just stopped listening. He said he was the only way. He said he was the way, the truth, and the life. Leor interrupted, and he was. He showed the way, lived the truth, embodied the life of one who remembers their divine nature. He didn't say, worship me. He said, follow me, become like me, do what I do, love as I love. John stood silent, struggling. Laura could see it on his face, the battle between what he'd been taught and what he was hearing now. I don't. He shook his head. I need to see. Where did this happen? Where did you meet him? Laura hesitated, but knew she couldn't lie. The old chapel, on the hill. I took him there, and he taught me, showed me, changed everything. The chapel? John looked at her, then at Leor. That place has been abandoned for years. Maybe that's where truth hides, Leor said. In the abandoned places, the forgotten corners, where religion has left but love remains. John made a decision. I want to see it. Take me there. Now. Laura looked at Leor. He nodded, understanding. They drove in silence, Laura's car leading, John following in his truck. The chapel looked exactly as they'd left it. Weathered, crooked, empty. They went inside, John walking slowly, looking around at the dusty pews, the broken windows, the altar where no one had prayed in years. And there, on the altar, was the cross, Leor's cross, the one he'd worn around his neck, now resting in the center of the old wooden surface, glowing softly in the dim light. John walked toward it, reached out, stopped just before touching it. What is this? His voice shook. A reminder, Leor said, of what the cross really means. Not suffering, not sacrifice, but union. Heaven and earth meeting in the heart, the divine and human becoming one. John's hand trembled. Is this... Are you an angel? Does it matter? Leor asked. Does the form matter? Or only the message? Does it matter where I'm from? Or only what I'm here to teach? You said... John turned to face him. Laura said you told her Jesus came from a brotherhood of light, that he was from somewhere else. He came from a place of deep understanding, a lineage of beings who remember their true nature, who travel between worlds teaching love, healing, awakening. Call them angels if that helps. Call them aliens if that makes more sense. The words don't matter. Only the truth matters. John sank onto a pew, put his head in his hands. I've spent my whole life preaching, he said quietly, teaching people about Jesus, about salvation, about heaven and hell. And you're telling me it was all wrong? Not wrong. Leor sat beside him. Incomplete, limited. You taught what you were taught, but there's more. There has always been more. Jesus tried to show you, but humans built walls around his message, made it exclusive, made it small, made it about rules and right belief instead of love and right action. Then what do I do now? John looked up, eyes red. How do I go back to my church and tell them this? You don't have to tell them anything, Leor said gently. Just love them better, serve them more fully. Let your actions be your teaching. Faith isn't about having the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. It's about staying open, staying humble, staying willing to learn. Laura watched this man she'd resented for 2 years, watched him break down, watched him wrestle with truth too big for his theology, and she felt compassion, because she understood. She'd been exactly where he was, 12 hours ago. Everything she believed shattered, everything rebuilt from the ground up. She sat on his other side. It's okay to not know, she said. It's okay to doubt, to question. That's not the opposite of faith. That's faith growing, becoming real instead of just comfortable. John nodded slowly, looked at the glowing cross on the altar. Maybe, he said finally, maybe faith is bigger than our explanations. Maybe God is more mysterious, more wonderful, more impossible than we ever imagined. Yes, Leor said simply. They sat in silence, 3 people in an abandoned chapel, holding truth too big for words. Outside, the world continued, ordinary, unaware, but inside, something sacred was happening, something that would ripple outward, changing lives, opening hearts, reminding people of what they'd forgotten, that love is real, connection is real, God is real. Not in distant heavens, but right here, right now, in every choice to be kind, in every act of courage, in every moment of grace. That was the miracle. That was the resurrection. That was the kingdom coming to earth, one heart at a time, one awakening at a time, one person at a time, choosing love over fear. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Laura was at home 3 days later when her brother showed up. Marcus, 6 years older than her, ex-military, 2 tours in Afghanistan. He'd come back different, harder, more suspicious of everything. He trusted facts, evidence, things he could see and touch and prove. Faith had never been his thing, even before the war. He knocked once, didn't wait for an answer, just walked in. That was Marcus. Direct. No nonsense. Laura was making coffee in the kitchen. She looked up, saw his face, knew immediately why he was here. "You heard," she said. "I heard." His voice was flat, cold. "People at Mom's church are talking, saying you've lost it, saying you're claiming some kind of miracle happened." Laura poured 2 cups of coffee, handed him one. He didn't take it. "Are you going crazy, Laura?" He crossed his arms. "Is that what's happening? Because I can get you help. There are doctors, therapists, people who... I'm not crazy." "Then what? What is this story about a stranger and a light and some dying woman suddenly getting better?" Laura set the cup down, walked past him into the living room. He followed. On the coffee table, right in the center, was the cross. Leor had left it with her. Said she would need the reminder. Said others would need to see it. It lay there glowing softly, golden light pulsing in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like something alive. Marcus stopped, stared. "What the hell is that?" "It belonged to the being I met," Laura said simply. "The one who taught me what love really means, what faith really is." Marcus moved closer, cautious, like approaching something that might explode. "It's glowing." "I know. That's not possible. There's no power source, no batteries. It's just..." He reached out, stopped just before touching it. Laura watched him. This man who'd seen combat, who'd watched friends die, who'd come home with scars on his body and wounds in his soul he never talked about. "I saw a healing with my own eyes," she said, voice steady, certain. "A woman who was dying, who couldn't breathe on her own, who had hours left, maybe less. And after he touched her, after he spoke to her, she was peaceful, her vitals stabilized. The fear left her." "Coincidence," Marcus said, but his voice wavered. "It wasn't coincidence. Then what was it? Magic? Aliens? What are you telling me?" "Laura, I'm telling you that everything we were taught about God and Jesus and faith was incomplete. That there's more, so much more. And I saw it. I experienced it. And I'll never be the same." Marcus shook his head. "You sound insane. You know that, right? You sound like you've joined a cult." "I know how it sounds." Laura stayed calm. "I know you don't believe me. But look at the cross. Marcus, really look at it. That's not a trick. That's not technology. That's something else. Something beyond what we understand." He stared at it, the light reflected in his eyes. For a moment, just a moment, she saw something in his face, not belief, but doubt. Doubt in his certainty, in his rigid worldview. That was a start. "Let me show you something," Laura said. She reached out, picked up the cross. It was warm in her hand, always warm, like holding concentrated sunlight. She held it toward Marcus. "Touch it." "No." "Why not? If it's nothing, if I'm crazy, then touching it won't do anything, right?" He hesitated, pride warring with curiosity. Finally, he reached out, let his fingers brush against the metal. The light flared, bright, sudden. Marcus jerked back, but not fast enough. The glow spread from the cross to his hand, up his arm, to his shoulder, where an old injury lived. Shrapnel wound from cobble. It ached every day, especially when it rained. Doctors said he'd live with it forever. Nothing they could do. The light touched that old wound, soaked into the skin. Marcus gasped, stumbled backward, hit the wall. Laura dropped the cross, rushed to him. "Marcus, are you okay?" He wasn't answering, just staring at his arm, at the place where the scar had been. Was, past tense, because it wasn't there anymore. The scar tissue, the puckered skin, the permanent reminder of the day he almost died. Gone. Smooth skin in its place, like it had never been wounded at all. Marcus touched it with his other hand, pressed, moved his shoulder in circles. It doesn't hurt. His voice cracked. It always hurts, always. But it's gone. He looked at Laura, eyes wide, terrified, awed. What did you do to me? Nothing. I didn't do anything. The cross, the light, the love, it heals. I tried to tell you. Marcus slid down the wall, sat on the floor, still touching his healed shoulder, still trying to understand. This isn't possible, he whispered. It's not possible by the rules we know. Laura knelt beside him. But there are other rules, bigger ones. Jesus knew them. He tried to teach them, and now, in our time, we're being reminded again. Marcus's hands were shaking. This man who'd stayed calm under enemy fire, who'd carried wounded soldiers through minefields, who prided himself on never breaking. He was breaking now. Tears rolled down his face. He didn't wipe them away, just let them fall. I saw people die, he said. Good people, kids, civilians. I prayed, when I still believed. Prayed for God to save them, to do something, anything, and nothing happened. Ever. So I stopped praying, stopped believing. Figured if God was real, he didn't care about us. He cares, Laura said softly. He always cared, but he doesn't work the way we were taught. He doesn't reach down from heaven and fix things. He works through us, through our hands, our hearts, our choices. Every time we choose love, that's God acting. Every time we show compassion, that's God moving. We are the hands. We are the miracle. Marcus looked at her, really looked, seeing his sister, but also seeing something else, something he'd lost years ago. Hope. This isn't human, he said, still trembling. No, Laura agreed. It's not. Then what is it? It's divine. She said it with certainty, with peace. It's what Jesus was trying to show us, what we forgot, what we're finally ready to remember. Marcus was quiet for a long time, just breathing, processing, his healed arm resting in his lap. I don't know how to believe anymore, he said finally. Forgot how. You don't have to know how. Laura took his hand. You just have to be willing. Willing to see. Willing to feel. Willing to let love in. That's all faith ever was. Not certainty, just willingness. He squeezed her hand, held tight. I'm willing, he whispered. I don't understand any of this, but I'm willing. And Laura, for the first time since her mother died, spoke about faith without guilt, without emptiness, without doubt, because she'd seen it, lived it, been changed by it, and now her brother, the skeptic, the soldier, the one who believed in nothing, he'd seen it too, the impossible made real, through love, through light, through the simple willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more to existence than what we can measure and prove, and that was enough. That was everything. That was the miracle continuing, spreading, one heart at a time. 5 days passed. Laura worked her shifts at the hospital, went through the motions of her ordinary life, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything felt sacred, connected, alive. She found herself thinking about the chapel, about that space where everything changed, where she met truth face to face. On the 6th day, her day off, she drove there. The morning was cool. Mist hung low over the fields. The chapel sat quiet on its hill, waiting. Laura parked, walked to the door. It creaked open like before. Inside, everything was the same. Dust, candles burned down to stubs, light filtering through broken places. But Leor was gone. She knew he would be, knew that encounter was finished. The cross remained, on the altar where Pastor John had seen it, where Marcus had been healed by its light. Laura walked toward it slowly, reverently. It wasn't glowing as brightly now. The light was softer, dimmer, like a fire burning down. She reached out, touched it, cold metal, but still warm underneath. Laura knelt, right there at the altar, and for the first time in years, she prayed, really prayed. Not the memorized words, not the ritual phrases, just honest, open, real. If I can love like he loved, she whispered, that's enough. That's all I want. To be love in action. To be your hands, your voice, your presence. However small, however simple. That's enough. Silence surrounded her. The chapel held her prayer like a cupped palm. And then, soft as breath, a presence filled the space. Not Leor, something bigger, older, more vast. The same presence she'd felt when Lior touched Annie, when the light healed Marcus. The presence that had always been there, waiting, watching, loving. A voice spoke in her mind. Not words exactly, more like knowing, like truth downloaded directly into her heart. You already do. Laura's eyes filled with tears. You already love this way. Already act as my hands. Already serve as my presence. You always have, even when you thought I was absent. I was working through you. Every patient you comforted, every hand you held, every moment of compassion. That was me. That was us. Together. She sobbed, shoulders shaking, hands pressed to the cold altar. You were never separate from me, never abandoned, never alone. I was always right here, inside you, moving through you, being you. The presence grew stronger, warmer. Laura felt wrapped in something beyond description, beyond words. Love, pure love, unconditional, absolute, and she understood. Finally, completely. God wasn't somewhere else. God was everywhere, in everything, in everyone. The separation was an illusion, a mistake, a forgetting. She was part of God. God was part of her. They'd never been separate, not for a single moment. Laura looked up, through her tears, through the golden light filling the chapel. On the wall behind the altar, a shadow. No, not a shadow. Light, shaped like wings, enormous, beautiful, spreading across the old stone. The voice came again. Clearer now. Jesus lives in every act of compassion, in every choice to love, in every heart willing to serve. He's not dead. He's more alive than ever, living through millions of hands, billions of moments. Everywhere love moves, he's there. I'm there. We're all there, together. The wings of light pulsed, expanded, filled the entire chapel. Laura felt lifted, not physically, but spiritually, like something heavy she'd been carrying was finally released. The grief over her mother, the bitterness, the anger at unanswered prayers, gone, dissolved, transformed into understanding. Her mother hadn't been abandoned, hadn't been ignored. She'd been held through every moment, carried through every pain, and when she died, she'd simply moved from one form of love into another. Death wasn't the end. It was a doorway, a transformation, a return to the source. Laura understood now, truly understood, and with that understanding came peace. Deep, unshakable, peace. She stayed kneeling, don't know how long. Time felt irrelevant, meaningless. Eventually, the light faded, the wings disappeared. The presence became subtle again, background music instead of symphony. But it didn't leave. Laura knew it would never leave, because it lived inside her, had always lived inside her. She stood, legs shaky, wiped her face, picked up the cross. It was cold now, the glow completely gone. Just ordinary metal, just a simple pendant. But Laura knew better. Knew the light was still there, just hidden, waiting, ready to shine again when needed. She put the chain around her neck, let the cross rest against her heart. Thank you, she whispered, to Lior, to Jesus, to God, to the universe, to everything, and somewhere, beyond space, beyond time. She felt a response. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for choosing love. Thank you for being willing to serve. Laura left the chapel, walked out into morning sun. The mist was lifting, the world coming into focus. She understood now, understood what Lior had been teaching, what Jesus had taught 2,000 years ago. Faith isn't passive, isn't waiting for rescue, isn't hoping for miracles from outside. Faith is active, is choosing love, is being the miracle, is understanding that you carry divinity inside you and letting it shine through every action. That was the truth. That was the way. That was the life. And Laura was finally ready to live it, fully, completely, without hesitation or doubt. The old life was over. The new one was beginning, and it would be lived in service, in compassion, in love made visible through ordinary moments. That was the resurrection, happening now, happening always, in every willing heart. Back at the hospital, everything looked the same. Same hallways, same rooms, same machines beeping, same smell of antiseptic and sickness. But Laura saw it differently now, saw the sacred in the ordinary, saw the opportunity in every moment. She started her shift, like always, but with a new intention, a new awareness. Before entering any patient's room, She paused, took a breath, centered herself, prayed silently, not with memorized words, just with intention. Let me be love. Let me be presence. Let me be your hands. Then she entered and cared, really cared, not just going through motions, not just following protocols. She touched each patient like they were sacred, because they were. She spoke to each person like they mattered, because they did. She sat with the ones who were afraid, held hands with the ones who were dying, listened to the ones who needed to talk, and something changed, not just in her patients, in her. Each act of care felt like communion, like worship, like prayer made physical. She wasn't just treating bodies anymore. She was honoring souls, recognizing divinity, serving love. The patients noticed. They talked about feeling calmer around her, more at peace, like she brought something intangible but real into the room with her. Relief, hope, comfort. Other nurses noticed too, asked what was different, what had changed. Laura didn't know how to explain, didn't try to push it, just said she'd learned to be more present, more intentional, more aware. Some dismissed it, shrugged, went back to their routines. But others, they watched, started copying her, pausing before entering rooms, taking deeper breaths, speaking more gently, touching more carefully. The change rippled outward, subtle, quiet, but real. Carol at the front desk commented on it, said the whole floor felt different lately, lighter somehow, less heavy. Dr. Martinez mentioned it too, said patient satisfaction scores were up, complaints down, people were healing faster, staying calmer. He didn't know why, chalked it up to coincidence, good timing. But Laura knew it wasn't coincidence, it was love, it was intention. It was people waking up to the sacred work they were already doing. 2 weeks after the chapel, Pastor John came to visit. He found Laura in the break room. She was eating lunch, reading a book on contemplative prayer. "Laura," he sat down across from her. "Can we talk?" "Of course." He looked different, softer somehow, less certain, more open. "You seem," he searched for words, "different, changed, like you're glowing from the inside." Laura smiled. "I'm just remembering who I am. I've been thinking." John folded his hands on the table, about what happened at the chapel, about what Leor said, about everything. And I think I've been doing it wrong. For years, maybe my whole career, I've been teaching people to wait for God, to ask for help, to hope for miracles. But I haven't been teaching them to be the miracle, to be God's hands, to be love in action. Laura reached across, touched his hand. "It's not too late. You can change. Teach differently. Live differently." "How? How do I explain this to my congregation? They'll think I've lost my mind." "You don't explain. You show. You live it. You love them better. Serve them more fully. And when they ask why you're different, then you can share. But only then. Only when they're ready to hear." John nodded slowly. "You really have changed." "I'm not another person," Laura said. The same words she'd said in her mind 100 times. "I just remembered who I was, who I've always been. A vessel for love, a channel for light, God's hands in the world. We all are," John said, like he was testing the words, tasting them. "Yes, we all are." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd traveled from different places, meeting at the same truth. Eventually John left, but Laura knew he'd be back, knew he was on his own journey now, his own transformation. That was how it worked. One person at a time, one awakening leading to another, love spreading like light. Impossible to contain, impossible to stop. The old disbelief was gone, the emptiness, the going through motions faith that meant nothing. In its place, real faith, active faith, faith that moved and served and loved without counting the cost. Laura finally lived what she used to only say, finally embodied what she used to only preach. And it changed everything, not just for her, for everyone she touched, everyone she cared for, everyone who witnessed love in action and remembered they could do the same. This was the kingdom coming to earth, not a place, not an event, but a way of being, a choice, a remembering. And Laura was part of it, had always been part of it, was finally awake enough to see it, to live it, to be it. Months passed, seasons changed. Winter came to Tennessee, then spring. Laura's life continued. Hospital shifts, patients, the ordinary rhythm of days. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything felt sacred. The cross sat on her desk at home. Lior's cross, no longer glowing, just simple gold metal. But Laura wore it sometimes, felt its weight against her heart. A reminder, always a reminder, whenever doubt crept in, whenever the old fear returned, whenever she forgot. She held the cross, closed her eyes, took a breath, and remembered Lior's voice. Healing begins when love moves. Such simple words, but they contained everything. Healing wasn't passive, wasn't something you waited for, wasn't something that happened to you. Healing was active, was love choosing to move, was compassion refusing to stay still. Every time Laura touched a patient, that was love moving. That was healing beginning. Every time she sat with someone in pain, listened, held space, that was love moving. That was healing beginning. Every time she chose kindness over efficiency, connection over protocol, presence over productivity, that was love moving. That was healing beginning. That was God acting through human hands. She understood now, truly understood. God doesn't work from the outside, doesn't reach down from distant heavens, doesn't perform magic tricks to impress us. God works from the inside, through willing hearts, through open hands, through people who remember they carry divinity. Each patient was a reminder, a teacher, an opportunity to be present, to serve, to love without condition or expectation. That was prayer. That was worship. That was the sacred work she was born to do. Faith wasn't waiting. Faith wasn't hoping. Faith wasn't believing the right things. Faith was movement, constant movement, love that refused to sit still, compassion that demanded action. The cross no longer symbolized pain to Laura, didn't remind her of suffering or sacrifice. It symbolized union, reconciliation, the meeting place of heaven and earth, the vertical line, divinity descending, the horizontal line, humanity reaching out, where they intersected, the heart, where love lived, where miracles happened. That was the true meaning. That was what Jesus had been showing, what Lior had come to remind her. You are the intersection. You are the meeting place. You are where heaven and earth become one. Laura told the story now, without fear, without shame, told patients, colleagues, anyone who asked why she seemed different. She didn't force it, didn't preach, just shared. Simple, honest, real. I met someone who reminded me what love really means, what faith really is, and it changed everything. Some people dismissed it, thought she was crazy, religious fanatic. That was okay. They weren't ready yet. But others, they leaned in, asked questions, wanted to know more. And Laura shared the truth Lior taught, the truth Jesus lived, that you are not separate from God, that love is the only law that matters, that every act of kindness is a prayer, that healing happens through willing hands and open hearts. She became a witness, not to religion, not to doctrine, but to hope, to transformation, to the possibility of waking up. Lior never came back, at least not in physical form, but his presence remained, in the lessons, in the memories, in the truth that lived in Laura's heart. She felt him sometimes, in quiet moments, when she was serving, when she was loving, when she was being exactly what she was meant to be. A whisper in her mind, a warmth in her chest, a knowing, you're doing it, you're living it, you're being love. And she understood. Finally, completely. God speaks when love decides to act, not before, not after, in the very moment of choosing, when you see suffering and move toward it instead of away, when you feel fear but love anyway, when you're tired but show up anyway, when you're broken but give anyway. That's when God speaks, through you, as you, with you. That's when miracles happen, not dramatic, not flashy, just simple, profound, one healed heart, one comforted soul, one moment of genuine connection. That's the miracle. That's the resurrection. That's the kingdom. And it's happening now, always now, in every willing heart, in every loving action. Laura looked at the cross one more time, touched it gently. Thank you, she whispered, to Lior, to Jesus, to God, to love itself. Then she stood, put on her coat, headed to the hospital. Another shift, more patience, more opportunities to serve, more chances to be love in action, to be God's hands, to be the miracle someone needs. This was her life now. Simple, sacred, real. And she wouldn't change a single thing, because she'd learned the greatest lesson, the one Leor came to teach, the one Jesus lived, the one every awakened soul knows. Love is everything. Love is enough. Love is the answer. Always has been. Always will be. You just have to remember. You just have to choose. You just have to let it move through you. And when you do, when you finally do, everything changes. Healing begins. The kingdom comes. Not someday, not somewhere else.